bring in Aquiles. Okay, Aquiles, thank you very much for joining us here on DeProgram with Ted Rall and John Kiriakou. John's got a few little tech glitches piping in the program from Mexico. As soon as he pops back in, I'll bring him in. Thanks for joining us, Aquiles.
Pleasure to be here, Ted. Always a pleasure.
So, John, hopefully your signal is back. So we have Aquiles on. I thought, he was in the back.
Hey,
we might as well just get to it. So, the government shutdown is now in its fourth or fifth day. It's not going to stop anytime soon. We're going to start to see, obviously some effects, like in terms of parks closing down and government services getting slower. But economically, in terms of how this is going to affect ordinary people, particularly ordinary working Americans, can you tell us a little bit what you see in the days and weeks ahead? And I do think, and John thinks too, we're looking at weeks.
Yeah, I agree with that. We may be looking at a month on this again.
Yeah.
Simply because both sides are so entrenched in their beliefs, in their actions. They're not even talking right now. So let's talk a little bit about what happens to a local economy when this happens. I'm going to take New York as an example. If we just look at the federal sites here in New York, the Statue of Liberty, if you look at Ellis Island, they're both controlled by federal agencies. And a lot of money is made for tourists who come in and they go to these sites. But a lot of money is also made in the local economy. So if you can imagine, you're coming to see the Statue of Liberty. Now you can't go see it. If you're lucky, the boat will pass by a little bit, and you get the boat stops in front of the pedestal, the footing, and then that's it. It is a chain, what I call a ripple effect, a chain reaction of events. Because when people stop coming here, which may well happen, you don't know, but if they stop coming here, they stop spending. Local businesses suffer, not the big corporations, not the conglomerates of sorts, but the local economy starts to suffer. When the local economy starts to suffer, the ripple continues. Then small businesses have to start laying off workers. When small businesses are laying off workers, then we're seeing an economic slowdown or shutdown of sorts. Now, I'm not predicting that that's going to happen, but the longer this drags on, the more likely it will have an effect. And now, remember, the last time this occurred during the Trump administration, it cost the United States $11 billion or more. I think it was almost $13 billion the last time this happened. So absolutely seeing a ripple effect here. We're going to start seeing it within the next few weeks. The longer that this goes on, the more this gets dragged out, we're definitely going to feel the pain at some point, along with that we're already seeing an economic slowdown. We're seeing higher unemployment. We're seeing inflation starting to creep up. That's why the Fed is doing its cuts right now and being proactive with that. By the way, the Fed has always been right. They've been wrong a little slow to the punch.
I was going to say, not in the early 80s.
Yeah. But they've been a little slow to the punch sometimes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're wrong.
Aquiles, why are mortgage rates not coming down even though the Fed's cut interest rates?
Yeah, that's interesting, Ted. The reason why that has happened is because the 30-year mortgage is not tied to these overnight rates, which is what the Fed is in control of. All right. The 30-year mortgage is more akin to the 10-year bond rates out there. And those have been moving up and down, but they are not as volatile as, per se, a T-bond, that goes out there, or, and they are not correlated with the Fed funds rate as well. So you cannot look at those two. It's kind of like an apple to an orange. You can't look at those two and say to yourself, hey, you should be coming down. As a matter of fact, let's actually step back, Ted. What I would tell you is that, can you imagine if, the Fed starts cutting rates as they did, mortgage rates actually went up.
Mm-hmm.
And the price, this is the one that nobody's talking about. The pricing on homes has gone up as well because they're
Bizarre.
trying to, yeah, they're just trying to uh, bump up as much as they can, citing a potential demand in the market. So that's the reason you're not seeing lower rates at this point. Now, is it going to happen? Absolutely. Absolutely
Mm.
going to happen. But you're going to see rates spike up first. Every
Is
single
there
time
also
they
kind
do
of an
this.
anomalous sort of lingering post-COVID work at home effect where people are leaving cities and going out to the suburbs and rural areas as well that's feeding the housing market?
Well, we're seeing that, but I think it's more to do with a lack of inventory, in
Hmm.
the metropolitan areas. We're seeing a
People are
dearth
locked
of
into low
inventory.
interest rates from their previous purchases and they don't want to
Correct.
move.
Correct. They don't want to sell, and then all of a sudden, they had a 2% mortgage or a 3% mortgage, and now they're facing 7%. That's
Right.
the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, that
So
sucks.
that's another reason. Another reason is cost of living. You know, the minute you get out of the cities, the cost of living is going down. Although it's changed, and the cost of living is actually starting to go up in the rural areas.
Mm.
So you're not getting that big benefit as you once did. And property taxes in a lot of areas have skyrocketed, double
Hmm.
digit increases. We're seeing in the metropolitan areas, not as much, but definitely if you go, not suburban and rural, are seeing property tax increases of above double digit percentages on the way up. So that's another thing that's slowing this economy down. So high unemployment, higher inflation. And the worst part about this is there is no easy fix. We might be talking about the R word right now, which is a recession. We might be talking about the
We're
S
way
word.
overdue, right?
Absolutely. We thought this was going to happen 2 years ago, honestly,
Hmm.
but now we're talking about stagflation, right? Where you're having this negative growth along with high unemployment, along with higher inflation. And this is going to create this environment of stagnation where nothing good can come of it. We saw it in Japan in the 80s. We've seen it around the world at times when companies and countries do not react to the environment that's happening around them. We're seeing it being created here by tariffs, by trying to take our economy back 80 years. It's to me, there is no rhyme or reason for this. I think we're just putting ourselves in problems. I think we know better than this. We're a better country than those countries were that hit stagflation. That doesn't mean we haven't gone through it before, but we're a better country than this. And we need to implement policies that make sense, that are not just for the privileged few.
Okay, so give me an example of one or two of those policies.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about tariffs, who ultimately pays
Yeah.
for the tariffs? We do. Don't kid
Hmm.
yourself.
Of course.
When the electronics are coming in from abroad, guess what? You're paying a 50% higher price than you did a month ago.
And it's going to drive some businesses out completely and they're going to lay off their workers.
Correct. So you're creating more unemployment. Now, I also want to caution, remember, we are entering a time, the last quarter of every year, companies do massive layoffs to get the fat off the books. It happens every year. It's like right now, if you look at October, September, October, the market traditionally gets weaker because hedge funds are selling off, mutual funds are selling off, large investors are selling off their They're declaring their gains, declaring their losses, harvesting their losses for the year. So it's making a bad situation worse, in my opinion, doing these tariffs without really any benefit at this time because it's tied up in the courts. Courts have already said that these tariffs are not legal and they're waiting for it to go to the Supreme Court. But the courts have already ruled on this. So we have to see what's going to happen next on that front.
Aquiles, Frasmataz commenter wants to know, are we looking at a deflationary trap like Japan in the 90s?
I hesitate. Japan was a different story because the Japanese were not flexible in their policies, and just the society had a lot of ingrained inflexibility to respond
Having
to the
worked at a
conditions.
Japanese bank at that time, I can totally validate that. It's part of
Yeah.
the culture.
Yeah, it's ingrained in the culture from the get-go. There are some positives, there's some negatives, but absolutely, we're not the same as Japan during that time. We, however, are creating our own mess here by, putting electronics 50% higher, by being in an, we're already seeing that slowdown and we're creating even more of a slowdown. We need to ask ourselves why. Who benefits from this? Why are we doing this? And what can we do to adapt?
Aquiles, what can an ordinary person who is not in a position to set or affect policy do in order to minimize the damage or even thrive?
Yeah, well, personally, you want to take a step back, look at your finances, make sure that any subscriptions that are unnecessary get off the books. You also want to make sure that any discretionary that really doesn't make sense at this point needs to come off the books. Then you need to continue to invest your money in your 401k. If you have some disposable that can go into an IRA to lower your tax consequences and such, albeit if you're 50 and above, you should be doing the catch-up provisions in your IRA and 401k. If you're 55 and older, you should be looking at a Roth 401k. And you can reach out to me. I could talk to you more about that if you're interested in that kind of deal. The last thing I would say is to be strategic, to be smart with your money. Most people do things by default, not by design. If you take care of those two things and you work with a good advisor, you should be able to ride out the storms relatively comfortably.
Aquiles, producer Robbie West, you know him well, has a question for you. I'm popping him on. Robbie, go ahead.
No, just a quick question. You do. Just a quick question, boss man. So you mentioned how the tariffs are a bad idea, that someone's profiting from it, but it's not the workers. So what my question to you is, if tariffs are a bad idea, then what can a government do? What, for example, Greece, I mean, they're exporting their younger population because there's no work there. The country is in a demographic winter. Our economy here in the U.S. is collapsing. So if tariffs are not the answer, what can a government do to incentivize companies actually bringing jobs back to this country? Because there's been other answer besides piss off, we don't care about you. Because that's what we're hearing right now. So what's the answer?
Well, there's no simple answer, but what I would say is, can you imagine if companies started implementing programs to retrain workers to adapt their skills to a new modern era, which I don't see happening? Can you imagine you create, quote unquote, a new deal of sorts for these workers? The government could implement where they say, we are going to upgrade your skills to work in the modern era, and you're going to do X amount of work for the government, but we're going to pay you, and we're going to pay you a decent living wage, and set an example to the corporations that unfortunately at times just the wages are stagnant, they're not going up. Can you imagine? I talked to a buddy of mine who works at UPS, and he was telling me back in 1988, he was getting X amount of, salary. He says that the guys right now haven't seen a big raise, per se, that keeps up with the cost of inflation in the better part of 20 plus, 30 plus
Oh
years.
yeah.
So,
Well,
and that's not
our
just
system.
UPS.
I mean, our system doesn't view people as a valuable national resource. It views them as just trash to be exploited.
Yeah, that's been happening quite some time. And, the government needs to lead by example. If we create some sort of new deal that could retrain the workers, get them to work, not make blue collar work a dirty work, because that's something that's happened over the last, I want to say 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
where, being a plumber, being an electrician, a steam fitter, all these different professions are now lacking individuals to work, to apprentice. There was a formal training program, and still is. There was a formal training program to become those that didn't take as long. Didn't take as long as college, that's for sure. And right from the get-go, you would make a ton of money within the first 2 years working in these professions.
How does
So we are
how
seeing
does
that
immigration
loss.
depress wages? We see a lot in Western Europe and here in the United States. Is that a valid concern though, for blue collar workers? I mean, if you can import them from around the world, why do you need to train your own?
Yeah, the I guess the issue ends up becoming, all right, we start bringing in these workers as we did in the past. Then we say to ourselves, yeah, we don't need to bring anybody in, but it's not a sustainable solution. We need to have a solution that's sustainable over time. Just I mean, people, if you think about it, H-1 visa persons coming in, yeah, it's you have some great work ethic, you have some great employees, but then at the end of the day, they go home, and when they go home, they build the capital, the human capital over there in their respective countries. And what are we left with? Oh, we got to find somebody else. That's not a
And
way to
and they
sustain.
often took a job from an American. Aquiles, thank you so much for joining us here. We'd love talking to you, but we have a lot more we have to get to. But we'll talk to you again soon. Aquiles Larrea is the CEO and co-founder of Larrea Wealth Management here in New York City, and always a pleasure to talk to you. So talk to you soon, and hopefully the ride won't get too bumpy too soon. Thanks, Aquiles.
Thank you.